Fraser, stay with us. I want to turn now to James Andre because we did not hear in those linear remarks about Iran. There have been those repeated threats of strikes. Instead, there was talk about Venezuela and the reopening of airspace there. Yeah. Just on this question of Iran feeling the pressure, what's the situation as we speak on the day when, by the way, EU foreign ministers have decided to put the Revolutionary Guards on their terror organization list?
Absolutely. Well, that's actually quite a pivot for the European Union. Until now, indeed, both the French, the Germans, and a lot of other European nations were basically resisting the idea of putting the Revolutionary Guards on their terror list, simply because that means it makes it much more difficult to negotiate with them or to broker deals. And as you know, when during his first term, Donald Trump walked out of the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA, well, the Europeans tried to revive that and tried to indeed broker something new. And this, of course, means that by sanctioning and by declaring that the Revolutionary Guard are a terrorist organization, well, that makes that negotiation obviously difficult. So what we do have here is clearly a pivot in the face of these very violent protests that have taken place and the crackdown of the authorities that have killed literally thousands of people in those protests. Well, it's the European Union indeed shifting its stance and deciding to go full on when it comes to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Now, Iran has actually reacted in the past few minutes, saying that indeed for them this was misguided and malevolent and that it was a strategic mistake for Europe, also saying that they were just in lockstep with the United States and Israel. But the fact of the matter is, yes, it comes at a time where we have maximum pressure by the Americans. We have this armada that's positioned to strike Iran. And we have, for example, today a meeting in Washington with top brass from the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, with allegedly, according to information from Axios, this American news site, that basically the Israelis are talking targets and the Saudis are trying to talk the Americans out of a strike, because indeed for now all the countries around Iran are very worried as well about this aggressive stance by the United States of America. And there's also been reports about how the administration itself is mulling over the idea of actual strikes and what could come in the wake of those strikes.
We have a guest who can join us from Italy, Shahin Modarres, who's with the international team for the study of security in Verona. Thanks for being with us here on France 24. Is it a good idea to put the Revolutionary Guards on a terror list if you're the European Union?
Hello, and thank you for having me. It is definitely a good idea, and it is actually quite surprising that it didn't happen sooner rather than now, because the fact is that the IRGC, since its foundation back in time, right after the 1979 revolution, has been doing nothing but exporting terrorism and applying terrorism and terror means on the people of Iran inside the country. You can clearly see that during the latest series of protests, like in a very brutal way and in a very naked way, in a philosophical sense, they massacred 40,000 Iranians. Outside the country, there are people who have been killing European citizens, American citizens, soldiers within the Middle East region. There are numerous terror attacks that the Islamic Republic has conducted within the territory of the European Union. And it is actually quite surprising that it didn't happen sooner than this.
Is it enforceable? We know, for instance, that the star striker for Iran's national football team did his military service in the Republican Guards. Should he be among those that's banned from entering the EU?
Well, I am not a legal expert and I am not a lawyer, and I will not enter this because it's out of my expertise. But what I can tell you is that there are people who have done their military service without any other options at the IRGC. I believe that the legal experts should come up with a solution for this. For those who did not intend to serve inside the IRGC, but still it's rather better to be careful than not, because a person who has served within the ranks of this terrorist organizational system could have been compromised as well. We can never underestimate this.
And Shahin Modarres, when with this this decision by Europe, it's hard to say though that the Europeans are in lockstep with the Americans. We heard the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas stating the region did not need a new war when it came to Donald Trump's military threats.
Yeah, well, the EU does not believe in a military intervention when it comes to this case because of many factors. But here's one thing that they are not seeing, in my opinion, that Iran is a country of approximately 85 million people. If it becomes a complete failed state and the situation worsens from the current state of affairs, it means that millions, waves of millions of Iranian migrants will be trying to enter the European Union, which will cause a crucial security issue for Europe. So if they do not want this to happen, one of the ways that they could have dealt with it was to put the IRGC on the EU terrorism list. And it does also something else. It somehow limits the Islamic Republic in a severe way from aiding other countries as a third party in wars, such as Russia and Ukraine. The Islamic Republic has been helping Russia in its invasion against Ukraine, and now it can actually be limited because the restrictions and the sanctions on people, individuals, and entities who try to import equipment that is needed for these drones or the ballistic missile program will now face severe consequences, which means that it will be lowered.
And one final question for you, Shahin. What about more targeted actions? I know that a lot of people in the opposition in Iran are furious over so-called Nepo babies, sons and daughters of high-ups in the regime who come to study both in the US and in Europe.
Well, it's really important to deal with that in a legal way as well, because the fact is that the parents, the families of these people, even if they have not committed any crimes or any unethical behavior, yet they are massacring the Iranian people. They have created a hell on earth for 85 million people inside the country and 8 to 10 million people within the Iranian diaspora. And they are enjoying their freedom and their luxurious lives, and they are trying to live the American dream, for instance, whilst their fathers, their mothers, their brothers and sisters are massacring my people. So this does not make any sense. If it is such a beautiful place that you have created, maybe you can go live in it. And I believe it is the responsibility of the United States, of Canada, and of the European Union to make sure that such people cannot even enter the borders of the free world anymore. It does not mean that we are going to condemn someone for the crimes their parents did. It is just such a hypocrisy that when people have been through a trauma like the Iran massacre that we witnessed, cannot digest.
Shahin Modarres, so many thanks for joining us from Rome.
Thank you for having me.
And we're in the company of James Andre and Fraser Jackson, our correspondent in Washington. James, just a quick word on this now. What's the next step for Europe if, again, this idea of Europe's distancing itself from possible military action on the part of the U.S.?
Well, I mean, It's a big question. The thing is, indeed, this is quite a strong move, the fact of placing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, because I'll just give you one example. It's actually interesting. There was a tweet by the Iranian foreign minister who said, Europe has just put our national army, he says, as a terrorist organization. But, that's interesting because that does go to show how the regime itself sees the Revolutionary Guard. They see it as, at least this minister says national army, which is rather surprising because it is not technically the national army. But that does go to show how intertwined, the National Guard are with the regime, of course, but also everything that has to do with any business in the country, any institutions in the country. So it is, declaring a large chunk of Iran as a terrorist organization. So, of course, it will have repercussions. Now, I agree with the guest we've just had. It's true that it is going to hurt. I mean, it's true that at this stage, the high brass in the organization have their children and families traveling across Europe, etc., in various countries. That's going to be difficult. They have assets.
It's still possible, though.
Well, I suppose it depends how wanted they are. Now, some people have been added to the list.
If the children themselves are not
sanctioned.
part of the Revolutionary Guards themselves, they're...
Yeah, but if you take the assets, for example, that's going to be complicated because these people have stashed money outside Iran in countries such as Europe. So that, of course, that means there is heat coming there, of course. And then you have people who have been sanctioned very directly with the recent decisions. I mean, there is the blanket terrorist organization new position of Europe, but also you have, I think it's now 257 individual people, up from 230, who are now on the EU sanction lists since today. And those include, I had a look at the list, I mean, you have the Interior Minister, you have the head of police, you have also a lot of the regional commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who are now on that list, and you have extra entities, companies that have been added to the list when it comes to sanctions. So yes, I mean, there is maximum pressure being applied. Obviously, the big question mark right now is what happens if the Americans strike. That, of course, is going to be the big question marks in hours to come. But in any case, Europe has positioned itself saying, right, the Revolutionary Guard Corps are a terrorist organization. So that means that technically, strikes would be, in a sense, at least overlooked or warranted by the EU. So I suppose that does change the rule as well. It could be, observed as
but it's clearly not what Kaya Kallas said. She said...
No, she says we don't want a new war. But say the Americans do attack, well, Europe will potentially say, right, this is a terrorist organization. So if there are the actual targets are part of the Revolutionary Guard, it makes it legitimate, if you will.